Hi everyone, I am Mahesh. In this video, we are going to discuss about variables and data types in Java. So we all have computers, right? Or laptops. So we all have like some text files, MP3 files or MP4 files or any other file stored on our computer. All those get stored on our hard disk. So in the same way, like when we wanted to write a program, we might need to work on some data. So all these data get stored on RAM. So say for example, so this we can call it as RAM, meaning random access memory, and we might be working with, say for example, we might be working with some data called 10, and this is a part of this memory, right? So this we can call it as some memory location, and this is also called as main memory. Random access memory, which we usually call it as RAM, or it is also called as main memory. And whenever we wanted to work with some data, that data will be stored on this RAM, right? And this memory location, we refer to it as variable. We call it as variable. And so in mathematics, we usually write, how do we usually declare a variable? So you can see it here, right? Like x equal to 5, y equal to 10. So this is how we write variables in mathematics, right? So in the same way, in Java also, like say for example, my variable name is a. So in that case, when I try to access this a, as this variable is referring to this memory location, when I try to access this a, I get the value of this memory location. So the value of a here is 10, right? So I get the value of 10 here, and this value is called as literal. So this value is called as literal in Java, and this value can be modified. Like say for example, I wanted to modify this data or this value, right? So I can just write it something like this. So with this, what happens is this data gets modified. As this a is a variable pointing to this memory location, whenever I wanted to access a, I always get the data in it, inside it. So this is about the variables, and we have three types of variables: local variables, instance variables, and static variables. And all these types of variables needs understanding of classes and objects. So we are going to discuss that in the coming sessions. Now let us discuss about types of the data. So here I had some number here, right? So instead of this data, I can have some text as well, some sequence of characters. Say for example, Mahesh. This is one type of data. Or I can have something like, earlier we gave some number, right? Some whole number. So we can also give some fraction number, like say for example some 3.142, like this. This is one type of data. Or I can just specify some single character here. This is one type of data. All these are different types of data, right? That's how came different data types as well for the variable. So the syntax for any variable is, right? So we have a variable, right? Before that, we also need to specify the data type of that data type for that variable. So data type specifically says that what is the type of the data that this variable is gonna hold, is what we are going to say before we actually declare any variable in Java. And why do we need to say this is, so each type of data has its own it is getting stored in the memory, right? So each type of data requires different amounts of memory, right? That's the reason we need to specify this. What is the type of the data you are going to assign into this variable is what we need to specify before the variable. And with this, Java knows that what's the amount of memory to be reserved in the memory for this variable is what Java will come to know. This is the reason we need to specify the data type before the variable. Now let us see the different types of data types in Java. These are the two types of data types we have in Java: primitive data types and non-primitive data types. Again, under primitive data types, we have Boolean and numeric. You can see Boolean has again like Boolean type. So Boolean accepts either true or false. So it needs like only one bit. So we also have a table here which actually says for each data type what's the default value, what is the size we need in the memory, and what is the range of values it can hold. So we'll go through one by one. So boolean, it actually takes either true or false, and the default value of boolean is false, and the memory required for it is only one bit. And one bit is, so usually memory is stored in bits. So you can see here like one bit is represented with either 0 or 1. This is one bit. And if we have like 4 bits, right, so it's called, say for example I have 4 bits, it's called one nibble. And 8 bits is called as one byte. This is the terminology of memory. So you can see 8 bits is 1 byte. Now let's go back. So boolean is a data type which has like one bit, which needs one bit for storage, and it can either store 0 or 1, or we can say simply as false, true or false. Next is numeric. You can see under numeric we have like character and integral. Char data type is one which actually needs 2 bytes of memory. So char actually holds one character at a time, and we have like char actually represents the Unicode characters. So what are Unicode characters are? Like we have many languages across the world, right? So and each language has its own alphabets. All the alphabets of all the languages across the world are represented using Unicode, and that is represented with, you can see it here, the default value is /u and 4 zeros. And why we need 2 bytes of size here is, so 2 into 1 byte is 8 bits is what we said, right? 2 into 8, so it is like 16 bits, and with 16 bits we can actually represent 65,536. So these are the number of characters so we can represent using these 16 bits. And so this character actually holds all the Unicode characters, and the default value is 0, and you can see the range is from 0 to FFF. This is in hexadecimal representation. And next comes integral type. Under numeric we have other type called integral. In integral again we have, it is divided into integer and floating point. So integer is, again integer we have like 4 types. You can see it here, it is divided into 4 types. One, byte. So let's see about byte. So you can see byte data type, it actually stores the whole numbers. So you can see it here, the default value is 0 and it requires 1 byte of memory, and the range is -128 to 127. So we can actually calculate this range by looking at the what's the size it requires in the memory. So byte is a data type which requires 1 byte of memory, right? So 1 byte is 8 bits. Again, like with 8 bits you can actually represent 2 power 8 numbers. 2 power 8 is 256, and we can actually represent negative numbers as well. So this actually represents integers, negative numbers as well. So it starts with -128 to 127. So in between we have 0, right? So it actually ends with 127. This represents 256 numbers. Next comes short. Short is a data type which is which requires 2 bytes of memory. Again, default value is 0, and using this we can actually represent 2 power 2 bytes is 2 into 8 is 16 bits, right? Again, like 2 power 16 is 65536. So we can actually represent 65536 numbers when we actually declare a data type as short. And the range is, you can see the range here, -32768 to 32767. Next comes integer data type. So if you wanted to actually have the integers more than these values, right, then you will be declaring your variable as int. So with an int actually takes 4 bytes of memory. You can see the default size is again 0, and it actually represents 4 into 1 byte is 8, right? 8 bits, right? 4 into 8 is 32 bits. So we can represent 2 power 32 numbers using this 32 bits. And you can see the range here, it's actually -2 power 31 minus 2 power 31 to this is 2 power 31 minus 1. This is the range. So using the size, if you actually remember the size of this any data type, right, you can actually calculate the range. Next comes long. If you really wanted to work with very long numbers, then like if you wanted to store some world's population like that, then you can actually declare your data type as long. And long takes 8 bytes. It is like 8 into 8, 64 bits. Using 64 bit, we can actually represent 2 power 64 numbers, and the range you can see here, minus 2 power 63 to 2 power 63 minus 1. And we have floating point data types under integral data types. So floating point are the fractional values which has the decimal points. For example, we can have some 3.4829 like this. So these are we called it as fractional numbers. Under this we have float and double data types. You can see it here. Float, the value of float default value is 0.0 and it requires 4 bytes of memory. This is the range, you can see it here. This is 1.40 e raised to the power of minus 45, right? So e here represents the scientific notation. This actually can be calculated something like this into 10 power minus 45. And whenever we are representing a float value, we always need to append it with, like at the end we need to represent it with f. Only then Java will consider that as a float value, otherwise it will consider it as a double value. And the range you can see it here, right? So that's the reason I gave the smallest value, you can see it here, and the largest possible value for a float is this one. And next comes double in the floating point data types. So double, we can actually store more decimal points. So in the floating point we can only store, like in the floating point we can only store 6 to 7 decimal places. And in double, like double actually takes 8 bytes of memory. 8 into 8, again 64 bits of memory is required to store a double data type. And you can see here the range of double as well, it is very huge, right? And it actually stores up to 16 decimal digits. So float stores the 6 to 7 decimal digits, double stores 16 decimal digits. So all these are primitive data types. Whatever we discussed just now from this table all comes under primitive data types. We also have non-primitive data types in Java. So like string, array, classes, all these comes under non-primitive data types, which we are going to discuss in the coming sessions. Now let us see an example on all these data types. Let us create a new class, and I'll name my class as data types. Select this checkbox, public static void main, and click on finish, so that we'll get the default structure of the class with main method in it. As we already discussed, main method is the starting point of execution of any Java program. Now let us see the data types. First data type is Boolean, right? Boolean, and I should be declaring a variable here. So variable name is of our choice, but the convention for the variable name is camel case letters. So what is camel case is, if you can have in a variable, you can have many words even, and each word should start with, each inner word inside the variable should start with the uppercase, except for the first word. First letter should be the lowercase. So you can see it here. For example, see, I said is true. Is one word, true is one word, right? So the first word, first character should be the lowercase, and from there, all you can have any number of words. For all the words, the first character should be the uppercase. So this is the convention for any variable, and the variable should not start with, variable name should not start with any number. It can contain numbers, but it should not contain. It should not start with numbers, and it can start with underscore, or it can start with dollar as well. So these are the variable name conventions. And this is the syntax. So first we need to specify the data type, variable name, and then the value. So the default value for Boolean is false. And you can see it here. I can assign either false or true. I wanted to assign false. If we don't assign anything to it, it by default takes false. Now I wanted to print this value, this Boolean value on the console. Sysout control space is a shortcut which actually gives you that system.out.println, and in this whatever we print, right, so this will be displayed on the console. Now I'll just say my Boolean value is true. which actually prints the value which is assigned to this is true variable. Now let us take next data type. Next data type is let's take byte. See, I'm having my variable name as b. Byte is my data type. B is my variable name. And byte, what's the range of byte? It is minus 128 to 127. So whatever value in between minus 128 to 127, we can give any value in between that. So I'll take 100 here. And let's print this value on the console. You can see it here. If we actually cross the range, say for example, minus 127, the range for byte is minus 128 to 127 byte. Say for example, if I wanted to have this value as some 129, see, compiler gives you an error. You can just see here. You can just hover on this red cross mark. It says type mismatch. Cannot convert from int to byte. By default, any number in Java will be considered as integer, and it says that this is should be this number should be declared it as integer. And if we actually give it within the range, then it accepts. You don't get any error. So this is how we can find out the range of any data type. Like if we make any mistake also, so the ID and the compiler actually tells you there itself that the value is out of the range for this data type. Next comes short. Short range is minus 2 power it is 2 bytes, right? Minus 2 power 15 to 2 power 15 minus 1. So we can give it any value, some value like this, and let me print the value here for short. Next comes integer. I'll declare int is my data type, I is my variable name, and I can have any number here, right? So I'll just say some random number like this. And if I cross the limit, you can see it here. If I cross the limit, it will actually shows the error. The literal, whatever the value we have given of type integer is out of range. Clearly, you can see the error. So it is out of range. So it can take only till here. Now let us display this integer value as well on the console. Int, just type I here. That's all. Let us see long now. Long is another data type which can hold more range, like it actually can hold 2 power 63 minus 2 power 63 to minus 2 power 63 minus 1. So it actually takes a huge number. So I can just say something like this. And remember, we need to specify L here, which indicates it is a long number. And this is not case sensitive. You can even give lowercase letter as well. Otherwise, it will be treated as integer and it will give you an error. Only if you specify L, Java treats it as a long value. So we also print this long value here. Next comes floating point value with the decimals. And float should be, we should represent this as a float using F. So always it has to be appended with F. Only then Java recognizes that this value is a floating point value. Or else if you remove this, it will be treated as a double value. It actually gives you error if you can see it here, right? So it says type mismatch cannot convert from double to float. So you always, if you wanted to have this value as float, you always need to represent it with F at the end. And next comes double. I'm declaring my variable as D and having the data type as double. So I can have some value here, any value here, and it should be This is optional. So we should be specifying D here. Specifying D here is optional. By default, it will take it as double. See, even though if I specify D or remove it, both are same. It's optional here. Here you wanted to store like a long floating value, then huge number of floating value, then we use the double data type, or else floats is enough. Now double. So I wanted to display this double as well. And then comes last one, char. So here char actually takes one character, right? So one character is usually represented in single quotes, two single quotes. See, I can specify it here like this. And this will take any single character. So these are all about the data types. Now let us execute this program and verify. Right click, run as Java application. And you can see it here. Whatever we are trying to display on the console is got displayed in the console. Boolean true and byte got displayed, short, int, long, float, double, char. And we need to know something about char here. So here char actually represents one character, right? So here A. We can even have it as any lowercase or any special characters even. See, even we can have special characters as well. As it represents Unicode, it actually takes any alphabets of any language in the world. So you can also represent it with, like, say for example, the decimal value as well. If I take 65, right? So in Unicode, 65 represents the uppercase A. You can see it here, uppercase A. And in the same way, we can also give the Unicode hexadecimal value directly. Like say for example, 00 some 66. This is the hexadecimal notation of the Unicode. See, this actually representing some lowercase f. Like this, if we know the Unicode of the character which we wanted to work on, so you can directly represent the Unicode here. Now, how to know the Unicode value, right? What's the Unicode for the character which I wanted to use? So for that, what we can do is open any of your favorite browsers and just type in Google, just type Unicode table. And you can take the first one, unicodetable.com. Just scroll down. You can see all the Unicodes here. For each character, there is one Unicode associated with it. Say for example, just now we did this F, right? Lowercase letter F. So just hover on that. You can see the Unicode U0066. This is what we give. And you can also see the decimal representation of it, 1 or 2. So you can use either decimal number or you can even use the Unicode directly, so that you can actually access this lowercase f. In the same way, you can actually search for the character whichever you wanted to work on and then just provide that Unicode value here in your program. So this is all about variables and data types in Java. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.